They say even the smallest secret can come roaring out. In the dead of night, at our underground bunker, something was pounding on a steel door. It was around 3 a.m. when I first heard it, a deep, rhythmic thudding from the end of the hall. The generator's low hum was no match for it. I trained my rifle toward the door, heart hammering in my chest. "Move to position. That door's coming down," I whispered into my radio, voice as steady as I could muster. The lights above flickered as if warning us. Something was trapped behind that door, locked from the inside, and it was trying to break free. I remember the feeling vividly, a cold lump of dread growing in my stomach. We never should have opened that door. Now, as I speak these words, I can still feel the vibration in the floor and smell the acrid tang of panic in the air. Whatever was behind that door had dragged our entire bunker into a nightmare we never asked for. I'm Corporal Alex Jensen, a communications specialist in the U.S. Army. In 1988, I was assigned to Site Delta, a top-secret subterranean bunker carved deep into the Chihuahuan Desert. We were a skeleton crew of about 20 soldiers and engineers. My job was straightforward on paper: maintain the communications consoles, monitor classified traffic, and keep our sensors calibrated. In reality, days and weeks in the bunker blurred together in an endless loop of checklists and radio chatter. There were no windows, just layers of thick concrete between us and the outside world. Every day felt the same: early morning system checks, midday equipment maintenance, and evening patrol shifts. My world was a maze of corridors, locked compartments, and humming electronics. Site Delta existed for one big reason: to monitor and respond to any covert threats during the peak of the Cold War. We tracked missile tests, intercepted encrypted transmissions, and relayed information to higher command. The bunker's design was brutal but practical. Endless vault-like doors, emergency generators, ventilation shafts with HEPA filters, and secure radio rooms lined with cables and blinking consoles. We lived in austere barracks, ate in a windowless mess hall, and slept under fluorescent lights. Outside the bunker, the desert was quiet and empty, but down here, we were on constant alert. I wore a dog tag and combat boots almost every second. It was just that kind of place.
Captain Jacobs was our commanding officer, a career infantryman turned communications expert. He ran the bunker like clockwork. Under his orders, every movement was logged. Each of us held 2 pairs of keys, one for the main gate and one for the inner lab section. My daily routine was so rigid I could recite it backward. Inspect the emergency generator, calibrate the HF radio transceiver, secure the classified archives, and report everything in the duty log. Outside contact was minimal: a weekly check-in to headquarters and occasional courier deliveries. There were no civilian visitors, no journalists, only us and our secrets. Nobody joined Delta for the scenery. We were miles from nowhere, living underground to keep secrets, just that, secret. Morale was decent, though we were all slightly edge. We stuck together. Mark Williams, my tent mate and fellow communications sergeant, joked that we were the luckiest inmates in the world. Olivia Chen, our tech specialist, and I spent more time comparing analog frequency charts than football stats. But despite the jokes and chatter, everyone knew the truth. We had signed away our freedom when we set foot in this place. If something went wrong, no one from outside would ever know. We answered only to the brass, the NSA, and the War Department's secret divisions. Rules in that bunker were ironclad. We had lists of do's and don'ts for every scenario. Every morning began with a security sweep. Double-check blast doors, verify locks with a timestamp code, and confirm our ID badges were working on every console. Each clearance level was logged with chalk on a blackboard in the control room, level 1 through level 4, with our daily activity bounded by the highest level we were cleared for. Our IDs were worn on a chain around our necks and swiped at each door. We even recited an oath at change of shift. No door without 2 keys, no message without orders, no question without an answer. Daily routines. Each shift had a strict checklist. Morning, log all sensor baselines, pressure gauges, airflow, rad levels. Noon, test backup generators and emergency sirens. Night, armed patrol rounds every hour, all corridors scanned with handheld metal detectors. We would tap on the metal walls and listen for hollowness. It was our odd way of checking for hidden compartments. Access protocols. The bunker had 6 main sections, A through F. Section A was the entrance and supply depot. B and C housed living quarters and comms. D was the power plant. E was research labs. And F was level 4, top secret areas. Only Jacobs and one other major had full access to Section F. We young corporals never knew what was there. When asked, Jacobs always said, "Containment." We took that to mean anything from a nuclear reactor to classified test projects. Before briefing each morning, Jacobs would hammer the last rule home. If you see something, report it. If you hear something, keep quiet. This place is sealed for a reason. We all nodded, but the unease lingered. He once pointed at the sealed hatch to Sector F during orientation and said, "You'll never have to touch this door. Live your lives without thinking about what's behind it." Still, just seeing that reinforced steel and a heavy padlock with a mysterious black coating was unnerving. It was the bunker's elephant in the room, acknowledged but not discussed.
In reality, secrecy extended beyond the door. Conversations were brief and coded. Even after hours in the dim rec room, a casual mention of anything classified would get someone a sharp look. Radios in the corridor were tuned to static when not in use to mask any stray conversation. Any breach of protocol, even something minor like forgetting to log a door check, was met with Jacob's icy stare. The message was clear. We lived by the book, or we lived by nothing. Strange restrictions became normal, like the unexplained curfew at 6 p.m., even though all lights stayed on, or the rule that no one could enter the maintenance tunnel alone. I remember the first time I noticed how weird all this was. We had just finished a midnight patrol. It was dark and still in the bunker, except for the low hum of fluorescent lights. Sergeant Williams piped up behind me in the hall. "Ever wonder what's in that locked-off wing, Alex?" He was a good soldier and kept his mouth shut, but even he let that slip. I shrugged, hating how loudly my own heartbeat seemed to echo in my ears. "No, Sarge," I managed. "I'm sure it's nothing we need to worry about." The lights above flickered once as if snickering. The door itself was old, out of place. We found it purely by accident one afternoon in June. I was rerouting cables in the East Corridor, Section B, reaching up to the ceiling ducts. Below me, a maintenance panel had snapped loose, revealing the jagged edge of what looked like a hidden door frame in the concrete. I called Jacobs over immediately. He knelt by the open panel, shining a penlight into the crawl space. We built straight walls here. A hidden door? How did we miss this? Our first thought was construction error, but any notion of that vanished as soon as we inspected further. We cleared the panel completely and discovered a sealed steel door inside the wall, one that shouldn't have been there. The door was 6 feet tall, made of thick reinforced steel with a heavy wheel lock in its center. Rust crept along its edges, betraying decades of neglect, yet it looked newer than the crumbling tunnel around it. Oddly, there was no door handle on our side, only that wheel. On the other side, which was impossible for us to see, Jacobs guessed it opened inward. The bolt had been turned, locking it from the inside. We all stared at it in disbelief. The control room computers had no entry for this chamber. My fingertip ran over a faded number stamped into the metal. 27 Delta 4, sealed 1969. A date so old it gave me chills. "Seal it back up," Jacobs finally said, voice low. "We'll log it as construction debris or something." But we knew a hidden door to an unknown section wasn't going to be ignored for long.
We decided to investigate quietly. Clues to its origin were scarce but unnerving. I searched the bunker's archives, dusty cabinets of paper files and punch cards, for anything resembling 27 Delta 4. What I found was this: a single blueprint, yellowed intact in a forgotten corner, labeled Project Meridian. The blueprint showed the bunker layout as it was designed in 1965. In it, the corridor bent right where our mysterious door now stood, but beyond that bend was an entire annex labeled simply Top Secret, Level Red. Over that annex, a stamp read, Sealed 1970. No one had mentioned Level Red in my time here. The word sealed was scrawled across it like a scar. When I confronted Jacobs with this, he clenched his jaw. "Old news," he said, but his eyes betrayed him. He snapped the files shut and walked away. Later, in hushed whispers with Mark and Olivia, we pieced it together. The bunker had been built in the early 60s as a communications relay and fallout shelter. At some point around 1970, something had happened in that annex. A fallout drill gone wrong? A radiation leak? The records were too redacted to say. The only other clue was a torn note in Jacob's handwriting found near the files. Level Red. Contain at all costs. I also discovered something in the dirty air vents. I ran the long probe through the duct that paralleled the secret door's wall, and at a certain point, it met empty space. The whole wing beyond had been walled off. When I tapped on the door itself, it resonated hollowly like a vault. Inside, an immense empty chamber must lie dormant. Curiosity gnawed at me, but our protocols clashed with my instincts. Jacobs forbade any mention of the door during roll call. We were explicitly told to ignore it, as if it didn't exist. There was one more piece to the puzzle. That night, late on standby, I heard a faint voice on the static channel of my radio. It was garbled, but I made out a woman's voice saying, "Help me, locked in." The squeal of static followed. We were far from any towns, and the radio had strict encryption. No one should be talking on that frequency. I looked at Mark as he sat at the comm station. He was pale. Neither of us said anything to Jacobs, but we both realized something else was in that bunker.
Our next step was cautious investigation. We set up what equipment we had. In Sector C, the unsealed parts, we stationed a video camera on a tripod aimed at the door. We ran power cables from a test generator to it. Olive Chin fed us heads up. All right, we have a 12-volt feed, night vision cam online in 3, 2, 1. The black and white image flickered onto a small monitor. I sat cross-legged on the floor beside it, rifle across my lap, flashlight in hand. For a while, there was nothing but static and dust motes floating in the beam of my light. During our first attempt, nothing dramatic happened. Nothing physical, at least, but electronically, the bunker didn't like it. As soon as we turned the camera on, the hallway lights dimmed for a second, then surged back at full power, the generator's gauge dipping. Jacobs muttered, "Someone cut the line to this section a long time ago. You're pulling from only one backup." We shut off the cam and lights, and power normalized. It was as though the moment we tried to shine light on the door, something resisted. Over the next few days, small anomalies continued. One night I was patrolling past Section B when the lights over the mysterious door buzzed and flickered. I clicked my light off and on in a heartbeat, praying someone else wasn't watching me too closely. Suddenly the door rattled as if a hand had slapped it from the other side. I jumped back. My reflex was to fire, but I hesitated. Our rules forbade shooting without confirmation of a threat. It happened again a minute later, louder. Thump. Thump. My radio in my pocket crackled. I almost said something into it, but the voice of someone screaming, "No!" came over it in static. Startled, I rushed to find Mark and Olivia. Mark had set up a vibration sensor, just a repurposed old earthquake detector, on the door. The meter was pinning against the red line. "We gotta open it," he whispered. "You hear that?" But Olivia backed away. "Corporal Jensen, maybe we should call Jacobs." I agreed, radioing the major. By the time he arrived, the door was quiet again. Jacobs ran a hand over the rim of the wheel lock. "No one's in there to lock it," he growled. "We'll do it on my say." We spent the evening running diagnostics through the crack of the panel. We hooked a multimeter to the nearby infrastructure. Nothing connected to the door. No power lines or circuits. Just concrete, steel, and old, dead silence. Jacobs ordered a formal plan. The next morning, with daylight hours, we gathered tools, bars, thermal cutters, and emergency explosives, small charges meant for safe door breaching. Even scarier, Jacobs fetched an old CRT monitor from Section E, said he wanted to see if we could catch any visuals through the wall.
First attempt was cautious. Crowbars and manual force. All four of us strained against the wheel. The lock held firm. As the metal groaned, Olivia's Geiger counter, left on the ground, spiked to an erratic high before crashing to zero. Seconds later, the whole bunker lost communication with the outside for a moment, as if a spark shorted something out. Our radios glitched. When the systems rebooted, the log showed an unexplained power fluctuation exactly at that minute. Jacobs cursed, "Must have fried the circuit. Keep tools on standby just in case." That night, after the exhausted crew went to their bunks, Olivia and I went back to watch the door. I propped my rifle against the wall. "Corporal Jensen, is that you?" I jumped. It was just the radio playback. Out of the static came a drawn-out sigh, then muffled laughter. Then as suddenly as it came, it was gone. My skin crawled. The corridor was silent, except for the distant hum of equipment. We left the camera rolling. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something on the monitor. A shape, a vague silhouette, as if a shadow had crossed behind the camera's view, but the camera was pointed at the door. We checked outside again, and nothing was there, except us and the camera. The feed had captured a shadow moving, then it dissolved into static. "Olivia, did you see that?" She shook, not trusting her voice. "Your imagination, Alex," she said. I wasn't convinced. I clicked the monitor back on, and the shadow returned, drifting near the door frame as if something tall was just out of camera range, half hidden in the darkness. Then it vanished again. A second, larger event. Corporal Ramirez volunteered for a night patrol in the tunnels by the sealed door. The next morning, he didn't clock out. We found his radio back in the command center, lying on the floor right in front of the sealed door. His uniform and boots were missing. No blood, no sign of a struggle. He had simply disappeared. His belongings were left in his locker as if he'd stepped out. Officers declared it an absconding case. Classic cover-up. But the other men murmured, "Who just vanishes in a bunker?" Major Jacobs tried to reassure us. The kid probably freaked and ran. We weren't buying it.
After Ramirez vanished, tension in the bunker reached a fever pitch. People started reporting small sounds near the door, distant sobbing, scraping metal, whispering voices calling names. One vent that led near the door froze over inexplicably. Our heaters were off, it should have been dry. A footlocker by our sleeping quarters cracked open on its own, revealing a faded old photo of the door, with something scribbled on the back, "Don't open." None of us had ever seen that photo before. Something was very wrong. The breaking point came quietly. Jacobs, normally composed, was pale. After Ramirez disappeared, I found him pacing by the sealed wheel lock in the afternoon, staring at it like a wound. His voice was eerily calm when he spoke. "We have one chance before this place goes to hell," he said. He called a special briefing that night. I sat with the rest of the crew in the dim control room. On the table lay our tools and plans. A blueprint of the bunker, a thermal cutter, 2 flashbang grenades, one of Jacob's survival rifles. The air felt thick. Jacobs drew a line through the old schematic. The annex, sealed for decades. Each night, whatever's in there is closer to being free. We all felt it. This morning, the power relays tripped on their own. The words in his head were calm, but his voice quivered. We're going in. 2 teams formed. I volunteered with Jacobs and Mark. Olivia took the comm console in case we needed immediate evac. After triple checking, we had gas masks, flash grenades, and a portable radio jammer to cut any mysterious signal. We positioned ourselves outside the door. The cutter's blade hissed and sparks flew against the steel. I stood guard with the rifle pointed at the door. The sound was deafening in the closed corridor. When the cutter finally burnt through a small section, we lifted it and heard a hiss of displaced air. Then, silence. I shined my flashlight through the gap. Inside, I saw only darkness. I held my breath. Jacobs jammed the wedge to keep it open. We didn't move for a moment, 1 foot forward each, afraid to cross the threshold. We stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy. My mask fogged immediately. My light beam cut a cone of greenish glow across a corridor. Cold steel walls. No markings. No signs of civilization. I checked the pressure gauge on my suit's panel, lower than in the main bunker, maybe indicating negative pressure. Nuclear? Mark mouthed, voice amplified in his helmet. Jacob shook his head and pointed forward. We proceeded slowly. The corridor branched left and right, like a maze. We saw wiring hanging from the ceiling and old junction boxes covered in decades of dust.
3 minutes in, Mark found something on the floor. In yellowed scrap paper, partially crumbled, a crude drawing of a face with hollow eyes. Below it, in shaky handwriting, "It sees. It's hungry." Mark turned pale and said nothing. I dared not speak. As we advanced, we heard a distant thump. Jacobs held up his hand for silence. The sound repeated, followed by a dragging, shuffling noise. It came from deeper in the annex. We fanned out, weapons raised. To our horror, around a bend we saw figures. 2 of them, hunched and half in shadow, but they did not move or respond to light. They looked like human-shaped silhouettes covered in tattered uniforms and shackles. One was tall, the other shorter. Both stood still as statues, but their gear, it was from the 1960s or 70s. Jacobs whispered, "Dead. They must have locked themselves in years ago." One of the figures tilted its head with a metal creak. The resemblance to Corporal Ramirez was too close. The short one had Ramirez's ID patch. Then the moment froze. The tall figure's knees buckled and it slumped. There was a muffled crack. Jacobs fired his rifle before anyone could realize it. The bullet hit where the tall one had been. Only dust remained, like a pile of gray ash. Mark staggered back, eyes wide. The smaller figure, Ramirez, was gone. In seconds, I felt a presence behind me. The heavy clank of metal. A block of concrete had shifted, sealing the corridor behind us. "Get back to the door," Jacobs yelled. We retreated and slammed the cutter hatch shut just as the 2 flashbangs exploded. The bright light and deafening booms sent my head reeling. For a moment, I saw more shadows darting in the corner of the explosion's glare. Maybe they were just tricking me. When I could see again, Jacobs was slumped on the floor by the door, bleeding from his side. A shard of metal had caught him during the retreat. "He's hurt," Mark panted. I dragged Jacobs back into the main bunker hallway, stopping the bleeding as best I could. By the time Olivia and medics arrived, Jacobs was in shock. He managed one coherent sentence. "Sealed. Like I said. Level red. They were alive, kind of." Then darkness took him. We watched as medics wheeled him away, refusing to let us near. Behind that door was nothing we could explain with logic. The soldiers from the annex were not dead bodies, but something else. Shadows bound in time. Whatever sealed them in had given them a phantom existence. We didn't release a monster, we uncovered ghosts, or something equally unthinkable. The bunker's alarms blared on their own until we reset them. Headquarters radio chatter had lit up with alerts by then, but we managed the cover story. Boiler malfunction causing false alarms. An accident. They patched up Jacobs and hid the worst of the reports in classified logs. The official version was that 3 men died from a gas leak in the sealed annex. My sergeant's report was edited out, the names removed. The powers that be at the Pentagon visited a week later, complimented us on our professionalism, and then all new seals were welded over that door. It was never to be touched again. Jacobs was quietly reassigned, likely for life, and he never spoke of what happened. The other men who saw even a shred were either moved or given new duties. We were told to sign non-disclosures about unforeseen containment breach. As for me, I should have been proud of our quick reaction, but I feel nothing but dread. I spend nights lying awake, haunted by what I saw and what I heard. My dreams are filled with the echoing voices from inside that door. Ramirez's voice, begging for help. Jacob's laughter chasing me down the corridor. Whispers calling me by name. Sometimes I swear the lights in my house flicker, or I see figures moving just outside my window. Maybe it's just stress. Maybe not. I can't sleep without leaving a radio on nearby, static on a channel we don't use. Sometimes, very faint, I catch something through the noise. Or maybe I imagine it. Don't open it. The static seems to hiss once I'm alone. They say secrets in the bunker stay buried, but some secrets have minds of their own. Whatever was behind that door, locked away for decades, is still out there, somewhere, waiting. And now I carry the burden of knowing it. Who can I tell? No one would believe me without proof. And yet I have this proof, those moments burned into my memory. In the end, the bunker stands silent, its halls as sterile and empty as before. But I am changed. I walk those corridors during patrols, heart in my throat at every echo, convinced the door would open on its own any second. The brass may have rebolted it and covered it up, but I know it's not really gone. So I'm talking to you now, even if you're just a stranger behind a screen. Ask yourself, what locks up the real monsters? Is it doors and walls, or the secrets we refuse to acknowledge? All I know is that one night, behind that door, the Cold War's secrets reminded me that some things never stay buried, and maybe they're waiting for their next chance to slip out.